All right. Turn the volume down. All right. We're live. We are live. Thank you for tuning in to check out tonight's episode of Doing God's Work. I'm Chris, and tonight's topic is it's a controversial one. It's called Exploring Origins of the Poser. And I feel like, posers have been it's something that has been something that people touch on pretty frequently online, and historically all throughout the metal community. Poser is, it's an insult that's thrown around. And you know what I thought about? Maybe we should dig a little deeper into posers and see exactly where the posers come from, who the posers are, and really what makes what what came first, the poser or the hair. And yeah, so it's yeah, I don't know. I figured it was worth invest doing a little bit of investigative work there. um I have hair tonight, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit, because it kind of goes a little bit to there's some history with the hair. A lot of that is just jealousy, because I've never had cool hair. So that's one thing that, starting out at a young age, made me really resentful towards posers, because they just always seem to have cool hair. I never had cool hair. It's genetics, my family. My hair was always just unmanageable, thick, uh, curly, and I could never do anything with it. And then it all started to fall out. So we'll talk about my hair a little later, uh, and you know, just get into my history with posers who I've known over the years. Anyways, it's good to see we have a few people in the chat here. Wilson, are you going all emo on us? Yeah. We'll emo. We'll talk about emo a little later. Rick is in the chat. I might have spotted someone who was posing as a bald man. Yeah, yeah. Those okay, Rick, the man with the full head of hair. Yeah, yeah. Just yeah, exactly. Shame those who aren't gifted with a full head of hair. Brian's in the chat. Hey, George, love the rug. Thank you. Thank you. The thing too with having a full head of hair, something that I've never gotten, the pleasure of experiencing, are things like tossing my hair, like doing like the flip and doing that. And or like you're out swimming and you can do like that, like, or you're in the rain and you're, like, yeah, I'm like so cool, like, yeah, is, and your hair's just hanging in your face, and like, yeah, I'm awesome because of my hair. I've never gotten to experience that, because my hair, when it would get longer, it doesn't hang, it just keeps growing out this way. I mean, in a way it is the white man's afro, but at that time, when I did have a full head of hair, the white man's afro, nobody, that look, it's difficult to maintain. And yeah, just one of the things about my genetics, my bloodline, that just is one of the many things about my bloodline that has just always disappointed me. And yeah, many things about my bloodline that, yeah, I don't know, lack any sort of anything that would impress, or you know anyways, I'm not going to get into that now. I complain about my family enough as it is. So, posers. Okay. I was now maybe just get a little bit into kind of my history with posers, and this would go back to the 90s. 90s, starting with, in my teenage years, all of us as teenagers, we were all naive. Especially this is pre social media. Um, so terms like poser weren't really thrown around. Yes, you had heard about a poser, but you didn't really know what a poser was. And the town where I came from is if you were in like a involved if you were in any way into like underground music or something, everyone knew everyone, and scene jumping was kind of common. uh you know, there were some people who I remember, like on a Monday they were a hippie, on Tuesday they were a crust punk, on Wednesday they were a raver. A lot of it just had to do with drugs, because that's where, the pot, mushrooms, acid, the hippies would get that, and then the punks were, more into just smoking pot and drinking a lot, and then the ravers were all into amphetamines and things like that. So a lot of it did have to do with drugs, but I never really started to understand what a poser was till I went to college. That's where I really started to come face to face with posers. And that's when I started to understand what a poser was. And it also is a coincidence too that for college, I made the dreadful mistake of choosing to go to art school. So, and let me tell you, art school is like an incubator, like breeding ground for posers. Like there is every poser, that you would ever think of, they all go to art school. And a lot of them come from money, and daddy's money is paying for their $80,000 art school education, and and daddy bought their car. I I Oh, I did the really smart thing. I took out student loans to go to art school. Yeah, so that's yeah, talk about lack of good judgment there, But anyways, yeah, that's for another time to complain about that. But art school definitely is the breeding grounds for posers, and that's where I first came face to face with a poser. And then that's when I would go and I would see bands play, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm like this. Posers everywhere. Every person looks the same. Like the guys, like there was sort of just like a cookie cutter mold for, okay, the guy looks this way, the girl looks like this, and it was the time to late 90s, early 2000s, the mod, like the guy who is 6'4" and 85 pounds with the mop haircut, a youth large t-shirt, a belt, like a studded belt and wallet chain that weighs half of what he weighs, and girl jeans, skinny jeans. See, before there were skinny jeans, then there were girl jeans before that, when guys who they all had eating disorders because it was a contest to be the thinnest person possible. So like there were guys, I swear you could see their heart beating through their shirt because they were just that thin and frail, and their clothes were that tight. But before skinny jeans existed, girl jeans were really what sort of set the path for what would become known as skinny jeans, because guys were wearing girl jeans with a studded belt, a youth large t-shirt. They were 6 feet tall, 85 pounds, and I was like, I've never seen people like this before. So me also, not only was I, never had cool hair, but I was also always fat too. So being fat automatically pretty eliminates you from being like a poser in a way, because being a poser is it's all about fashion and just the aesthetics of what the of what's cool. And being fat, I was like, okay, I was always just like the fat kind of nerd who was always at the merch tables. I did go see a lot of the bands that the posers were into, but there were also some really clicky, like extremely like scene core. uh I don't think the term scene core ever really existed, but it should have, because there were bands that played specifically for the scene stir poser crowd. Um, but yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit. So going back to art school, it's something where I'm so far removed from it, but I still every day regret the decision. It really is. Art school is something that shouldn't even, art schools should be completely defunded. um it's just a luxury for rich kids who have no who are low IQ and have very little direction in their life, but the daddy has plenty of money to pay for everything, so they don't really need to worry about much. Yeah, and in art school, again, posers everywhere. It's Nothing is more obnoxious than like a 20-year-old who needs to express themselves, and crap like that. But so anyways, I was thinking we should do a little bit of research online to see what what it is that we're talking about here. And let's see, who do we have in the chat here? Brian, I got that white man afro as well, which is why I keep it short. Yeah, but at least you have it. Yeah, so just be happy about that, because yeah, the white man afro, enjoy it while it lasts, because once it's gone, it's gone. My first exposure to posers was online. I did come across some of them who look and try hard with their music taste. They get new. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, we're gonna get a little bit into that, the poser with the U. So that's not just a Canadian thing. Seeing kids in 2000s, early 20s. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that the yeah, let's look at some pictures here of let's get on trusty Google here. All right, so here we are. I typed in 2000s emo poser. And I think that this era is probably the most obnoxious. When it comes to people who were just so cookie cutter, and just everything about the fashion and the attitude and how smug they were. It was just so ridiculous. And the hair was just absolutely retarded. The bands were awful. Like when it came to, there was like the mod type of uh screamo look of the late 90s, but then it started to become, and a lot of that music was good. Bands that did have, the guy with the mop hair and the youth large t-shirt and the girl jeans and the studded belt. There were bands that, it was good stuff, like Orchid, and a lot of that, late 90s screamo. It's great stuff. But then what happened is, then there was the second wave of that style, and it became a lot more focused on the fashion, and guys wearing eyeliner, and they all had this exact same mop hair. And and then that's when it started to become mainstream, was that type of look. And the term emo just became so gross to just even say it just became so gross. But this for me, like, this era was, oh god, look at that loser right there. This era was kind of like, yeah, you know, college and just this whole just like clique of just everything being the same with the hair hanging in the face. And this was really, I think, kind of like, because there were quote unquote posers before this, but I think this is what really made the poser explode. And because you know, before then it was like posers in metal, like a lot of times were just, you know, kind of nerds. But you know, that's really not a poser. It's there was a time when trendies was a term that was thrown around. Nah, I've never heard anybody say that one, but there was a time when trendies, when the posers and the trendies, you know, were two terms thrown around, and that was sort of just that like militant, you know, heavy metal type of, you know, fist in the air type of metal attitude. Um, but trendies, yeah, that term never really stuck around that much. But you know, the poser has been around for a long, long time, and I feel like it was this this look and this style of just crappy music. Oh my god, the music was awful. And every song, it was like some guy screaming, and then there's the chorus where he sings, and then he's screaming. I mean, this music was just so terrible. Just really awful stuff. It sucked trying to date at the time, because girls like this too were so superficial, where it was like, you know, you're if your youth large t-shirt was just even a little too loose, they wouldn't go out with you or anything like that. And you know, I was fat, so immediately I was cut off from any chance of that. But they were so obnoxious. And around this time too, I want to say, is when Hot Topic started to show up. When did Hot Topic appear? Let's take a look at Hot Topic. I think, was it spelled with a K? Or where they would go and get their hair color. And okay, Hot Topic. This was another thing too, where it was just like, just the it was just so commercial, and just the marketing behind all of it just got to be so ridiculous. But yeah, oh, here we go. This is, yeah, this is the classic Hot Topic logo right here. Um yeah, this whole type of thing was just a disaster. I guess nowadays, what are they going for, a more contemporary look or what? Maybe. I'm surprised. The funny story is, I had a corporate job where with a private equity firm that owned my company also owned Hot Topic. So I guess sort of 3 degrees of separation. I worked for Hot Topic, not not in any capacity whatsoever, but there was still, you know, there could be some history traced, like if I'm ever running for office, or if someone wanted to call me out for being a poser, they could, you know, trace my employment history and see that during these years I worked for this corporation that was owned by this private equity firm that also owned Hot Topic. So then I could somehow be traced to working for Hot Topic. You know, it could be one of those like hit piece, one of those hit piece headlines, like clickbait headlines, like Chris used to work for Hot Topic. Like, no, I didn't. I didn't work for Hot Topic. I worked for a corporation that was owned by a private equity share a firm that also owned a hot Topic. But yeah, yeah, this oh god, this is god, guys with eyeliner, and oh, it was just so awful. It really was. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the girls were kind of hot who were into that goth punk dominatrix type of look. Yeah, I'm not going to speak too negatively about them, but because then they also, that's when sort of Suicide Girls started. Suicide Girls, um, if anyone remembers, I don't even know if Suicide Girls is still a thing, but that's when, the early 2000s scenester emo poser girls started to become nude models, and that's what a lot of them were. I was roommates with a girl who ended up becoming an alt porn star, and yeah, yeah, that's I could go on for a long time about what it was like living with a stripper at the time, but yeah, this whole scene, the early 2000s hot topic mall poser scenester emo thing is what kind of like spawned this whole Suicide Girls, this like crazy, extremely superficial persona that they had. And I don't ever remember, maybe it's just that I was, before that I was too young. I don't remember there being a clique or a fad or anything that was just as obnoxious. I mean, I would say that probably late 90s like UK punk was pretty obnoxious. I never ever, I mean, I liked a good amount of that music. I was never really into like the UK punk. I just sort of just really lacked talent and angst and stuff. Just, I mean, it was fun when I was a teenager, but I never ever listened to anything like that. But I think like the UK punk look of the late 70s, the mohawks, the leather jackets, all again, guys who are 85 pounds and wearing skinny jeans. I guess, but it wasn't mainstream culture. I just I don't think really caught on to it like it did when companies learned how to capitalize on it, like they did in the early 2000s. And of course, the internet and the beginning of social media, talking about MySpace and Friendster, if anyone even really remembers that. But social media also too, because then of these type of people, they all had the same, their let's go back to their, like, the, what was it, the 2000s emo poser, yeah, images, because then it was like their whole profile pictures all had to look the same. There was that one pose that almost all the girls had, and then, you know yeah, I don't know, it was really annoying. But yeah, I don't know, I just think that this era, I think, really is what really gave birth to the poser, like the poser with a capital P. Um, let's go to let's start to let's go to good old dictionary.com, because I want to see what the actual definition is for a poser. All right. Poser. A person who poses. Okay, a poser with a U, especially a person who is trendy or fashionable in a superficial way. Now, that's the noun. There is origin of the poser, first recorded in 1885. Wow. 1880 posers in 1885. What kind of music were people listening to in 1885? You know, that's kind of like 1885 posers. You know, when I think about music for that time, I just think of, you know, like a moonshine jug, like someone just huffing and puffing into a moonshine jug and, you know, playing a banjo on a front porch or something. I can't believe that in 1885 the posers have been around for that long. I mean, are you telling me that posers have been around before metal? Is that what that's saying? Words nearby poser, posadas, that must be the Latino or the Latin X poser. Pose, posidian, posin, poser, poser with a U, posy, posh, posho, and poised. Poser, noun, a question or problem that is puzzling or confusing. Okay, now that is the British definition. So that could be saying that if you're stumped, or if you you know, can't figure something out, then that is, yeah, I don't know. I'm not British. I'm not going to sit here and try to explain. Origin of poser, first recorded 1580. 1580. First recorded in 1580. The origin of a poser. This is getting crazy. I mean, that's going back to, you know, 1580. Good Lord. I mean, that's during the time when music was, they were just banging two rock together. How was anything fashionable in 1580? I mean, maybe, I guess maybe for, you know, during the Renaissance, but I don't know. I went to art school. I don't have I don't have answers like this. You know, the Renaissance, the Crusades. What the hell do I know? At 1580, what was that? The Baroque era? How, I don't know. Words related to poser: hypocrite, imposter, mimic, poser, pretender. Perplexity, problem, puzzle, question, riddle, stickler. How to use poser in a sentence. Let's see what this is here. Poser argued that the close relationship may have prevented Crocs from seeking out the best deal when selling its products. Okay, so that's from the Daily Beast from 2013. So that's saying, I mean, I do see a good amount of Crocs. I've never thought about Crocs as part of like a poser's wardrobe. It seems like, you know, it's more of like a line cook wardrobe, or, yeah, I do see people wearing Crocs, ironically, I guess, but I'm not going to hold that against them. To make matters worse, Poser noted that when he regards as a conflict of interest that may be influencing sales decisions. There we are about Crocs again. Okay. Let's see. I would much rather pay to hear what Bruce Jenner has to say than that poser starlet. Ooh, that's rough. That's from the Daily Beast from 2010. You know what? Dictionary.com. It's a little boring here. Let's go to our good friends over at Wikipedia. And now what we'll do, we'll see what a poser is according to the fine folks at Wikipedia. All right, so we'll zoom in here. Poser, a person who inauthentically adopts a certain subculture. Okay, a person playing a role play, a fake, an imposter. And then, oh, now there are specific people who have Poser in their name. Bob Poser from 1910 to 2002, a U.S. baseball player. God, imagine wearing a jersey every day that just had Poser on the back of it. That'd be tough. That'd be real tough. Charles Poser, a Belgian American neurologist. Ooh. So that could be like, I wonder if you could like, oh, I don't want him operating on me. He's a poser. Like he's not. I wonder if he was like a surgeon poser. Like he wasn't really a surgeon. He was just wearing, like the white, the scrubs and the surgical mask and all of that, just pretending, he was role playing to be a neurologist. I would have to say that probably would be pretty difficult to be a poser neurologist, but I don't doubt that they exist. I'm sure there are at least a few of them out there who um, aren't really the neurologist that they claim to be. Like maybe they just use it as a pickup, to pick up chicks in a bar or something. Christian Poser, born in 1986, German bobsledder. Interesting. There's a poser who is a bobsledder. I mean, well, that is one thing too about the posers is that they were never really known for their athleticism. Um, Bobsledding is unique. I will give them credit for that, for a poser bobsledder. But the thing is that when the poser is 85 pounds, 6'4", and has on a youth large T-shirt and girl jeans, how are you going to push a bobsled? I mean, because those bobsleds. I mean, I saw Herschel Walker was a bobsledder, and it's he could crush people. Daniel Poser, a Hungarian soccer player. All right, see now this is one thing too about the posers. He has an accent symbol. Posers loved that whole type of like an either an accent symbol or one thing that they always did that I saw is they would change the name of their spelling. So if their name just couldn't be spelled the normal way, it had to be that I can guarantee was not on their birth certificate, but the poser had to come up with some clever way of spelling their name to look edgy and different. Like if my name is Chris, but if I was a poser, I would have spelled my name like Krys, something like that. It not just the typical CHRIS. Like no, because I'm a scenester, hipster, poser. I need to spell my name different, and so that would be Krys. That's what a lot of the posers were really into. Hungarian football, yeah, so not like American football, but soccer. Heinrich von Poser, German travelogue from 1599 to 1661. Wow. So he must have been like a cartographer or something like that. I don't know. Interesting stuff. Lydia Poser. All right. So now we're getting into the lady posers here. German politician. Yeah, Lydia. Rainier, a German boxer. I'm not going to speak too negatively about Rainier because he is still around. Even though he was born in 1941, he could still probably beat my ass. So I'm going to give Rainier a pass, He's a German bantamweight boxer who won the bronze medals of international competitions. Yeah, he won some medals too, and he competed in the Summer Olympics. So he could still if he's probably like around 80 years old or so, he could probably still kick some ass. So Rainier, you get a free pass from me. Notice a lot of Germans here. Kind of make you wonder if the real origins of the poser, if they all came from Germany. Sophie Poser, German track and field athlete. Yeah, a lot of the posers, they're athletes too. It's interesting because that really sort of goes contrary to the posers that I knew who just drank Pabst Blue Ribbon. They weren't known for their athleticism whatsoever, but then neither was I, so I really can't say much. Udo Poser, German swimmer. That's quite a jawline right there. that is. Hmm. And then William Poser, a Canadian American linguist. Interesting. A Canadian American linguist. So what would the Canadian American linguist, I mean, is it like, oh hey, like just variations of what A means? I don't know. Wilson's in the chat. He probably would know a thing about Canadian American linguists or something. Other uses, poser. Yeah, God, gross. I don't want to get into that. 3D design, not my thing. Poser criteria, a now deprecated diagnostics for diagnosing multiple sclerosis. Wow. So that's like saying that being a poser are warning signs that of multiple sclerosis. So if you go around and you're in your skinny jeans and your mop hair, that's a warning sign that you'll probably end up in a wheelchair at some point with a feeding tube, um, because it's a symptom of probably coming down with multiple sclerosis. Wow. Interesting stuff. Let's look at poser with a U. Ooh, this one looks saucy. Poser with a U, not to be confused with poser without the U. A poser with a U is someone who poses for effect or behaves affectedly, who affects a particular attitude, character, or manner to impress others, or who pretends to belong to a particular group. A poser may be a person who pretends to be what they are not, or an insincere person. They may have a flair for drama or behave as if they are on stage in a daily life. Yeah, because that is one thing, the whole flair for drama or behave as if they are on stage in daily life. One thing that is true about posers, and that's really obnoxious, people who are stage performers and they have a character on stage, but then off stage they still are that character for effect. That's really obnoxious, and I just hate those people. Nothing is from my time of stand-up comedy and just performers who I've seen over the years. There is a lot of that, of the person who their stage persona then is who they are, in when they're hanging out with people and stuff like that, and it's just so obnoxious. So that is a big poser right there. So someone whose stage presence carries over into their personal life. Let's see what we got going on in the chat here. Sadly, we have Hot Topic in Canada. But Hot Topic had all the Marilyn Manson merch. Yeah, a lot of that. Well, I gotta say, Marilyn Manson, probably a whole lot of posers listening to Marilyn Manson. Never did the patched plaid pants. Nope. No, I did not. I was always too fat. Like patchwork. Yeah, patchwork on a fat person is just a bad combination. Kind of like how in, the 90s when the wide leg jeans were a thing, like Jankos and kickwear and all of that. If you were fat and wore that, it just looked ridiculous because you just looked like this mountain of fabric just walking towards someone. Like you could get swept away if there was this like drift of wind. You could you'd look like a sail on a boat. Let's see here. What else? Maybe the R is silent with that surname. Nope, they were a poser. Many poser gynecologists, I'm sure. Oh yeah, yeah, I believe that. yeah, I don't. Yeah, being a gynecologist sounds like a risky risky endeavor to get into nowadays. Spell it. Yeah, okay. I don't know what you're talking about, eh? Yeah, see, exactly, that Canadian linguist thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Actors too are another one. I've known plenty of actors, and they are some of the fakest people because their job is being fake. Their job is putting on a persona that sells. And so many actors are just their views on politics or wherever they stand on an issue or something. It shifts based on what will get them work. It really does. Actors, I hate actors. I really do. Anyways, back to posers. Poser with a U or poseuse. Ooh, I like that. Poseuse is also used to mean a person who poses for a visual artist. So poser without the U, poser with the U, and then poseuse. That's a good one. I like that one. The playwright Oscar Wilde has been described as a poser. Thomas Hardy said of him, his early reputation as a poser and fop, so necessary to his notoriety, recoiled upon the scholar and gentleman, as Wilde always innately was, and even upon the artist. Lord Alfred Douglas said of Wilde that he had what passed for genius nobody will, I think, nowadays dispute, though it used to be the fashion to poo-poo him for a mere poser and decadent. Now that's some hard-hitting stuff right there to be labeled a decadent. I don't know. It's kind of like being labeled a poser is one thing, but then also being labeled a decadent. That's like a double, double fist punch right there. So let's go back here to Oscar Wilde. Now, his early reputation as a poser. What is a fop? Fop became a pejorative term for a man excessively concerned with his appearance and clothes in 17th century England. Some of the many similar alternative terms are coxcomb, fribble, poppin, a dandy. Okay, we know what a dandy, fashionmonger, and ninny. Macaroni was another term of the 18th century. Wow. So a dandy, okay, a dandy, fashionmonger, a ninny. I haven't heard that one before. Fribble, I haven't heard that one before, but I do. I think dandy is one that was kind of like became like a southern term. Like, oh, someone is a dandy. That was like a kind of a put down in the South, I believe. But still, we're talking about posers that go back to the 17th century England. Ye old poser. 17th century posers go back that far. Posers predate metal. What about poser snacks? Is a Twinkie a cake, an Oreo a cookie? Hmm. Poser snacks. Well, you know what poser snacks were? You know how there was always the dollar store version of something, like there was the family dollar version of Oreo cookies, and they were called um they were called something else, or I would think that would be like the snack equivalent of a poser, are the those weird off-brand um you know snacks that you'd get at the dollar store. They tried to make the packaging look like the real thing, but then it was called something else, and they were made by some company that had no notoriety whatsoever, and um had twice the amount of chemicals and toxins in the snack cakes and stuff like that. I heard of Popinjay as an insult, but it means someone who is in vain or a self-centered chatterbox. Huh. Now, Chatterbox, that's I'd like Chatterbox to make a comeback. I think it'd be good to label someone a Chatterbox. A decadent. That's one that I like, is the decadent. He's a mere poser and a decadent of Oscar Wilde. So this is saying that the term poser goes back to the 17th century. That is incredible. That is absolutely, my mind is blown right now. I mean, look at these guys. These guys right here look like what a Williamsburg hipster looked like in 2005. When I lived in New York and in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, that was at the time when, Williamsburg was really booming, and there was always like the artisan pickle shop, on a corner, and then everything was artisan, and then that's when terms like farm to table started to be used in marketing, and things like, so everything was farm to table and artisan this and um handcrafted and all of that type of shit, when all they were really were just trust fund kids, um who could had daddy's money to start a company. But yeah, especially this guy right here, he would have fit in well in Williamsburg in 2005. He would have gotten laid a lot, definitely, by some really hot chicks too, but still. Let's see here. Poser. Let's kind of scroll down a bit here. Use within contemporary subcultures. Okay, this is where poser is often a pejorative term as used in the punk, heavy metal, hip hop, and goth subcultures, or the skateboarding, surfing, and jazz communities. I didn't know jazz had posers, but it would seem probably. I'm sure there are a lot of jazz posers out there. I don't know why anyone would want to pretend to be into jazz. I hate jazz, but hey, whatever. Punk subculture. Now, punk really, punk is to blame for what became of posers and all of that. It was sort of like, that's what all gave birth to the whole, sort of the UK. What was really sad when I lived in New York too, St. Mark's Place, there were still sort of just some pockets of old St. Mark's hanging around there, but St. Mark's Place was pretty commercialized and corporate, when I lived in New York. But the CBGB's was gone, but there were still some like that bondage store, I've Vampires of Hollywood, I think is what it was called, or something like that. I can't remember. And then there were a couple other carryovers from that time that somehow still managed to survive on St. Mark's Place. Other than that, it was all gone. There was, I remember there was like a T-Mobile store and all of that. But the sad thing is that there were still like the UK 77 type of punks who would still hang out on St. Mark's Place, like at the Chipotle, but they still had like, tattoos on their faces, and they were all addicts and had mohawks and stuff. It was pretty sad. Okay. David Marsh, in an article in Rock and Rap, speaking of those first punk kids in London, says the terms in which they express their disdain for hangers-on and those who post hip credentials didn't quite make it, came straight out of the authenticity movements. Didn't quite, okay. Posers was the favorite epithet. Ross, someone argues, eventually that Australian punk scene opened the door to a host of posers who were less interested in the music than in UK punk fancy dress and being seen to be hip. So that's when they were more into the fashion than they were into the actual substance of the music or anything like that. Describing a rehearsal of The Orphans, he says there were no punk identikit posers present. Okay, yeah. I kind of like that. I like that. Posers, yeah. A 2015 article about early punk subculture in the New Republic states that punk was as immersive as a motorcycle gang or membership in the mafia. Part-time participants were derided as posers, while any deviation from orthodoxy was a sellout. This punk militancy created an economic and social ghetto which was nearly impenetrable to corporate infiltration and which only adventurous or deranged souls dared enter. Yeah, I don't know. I never liked. I was not never into. I mean, I listened to a good amount of the bands from that time, but never once. I couldn't have a mohawk because of my bat. I never had cool hair. I couldn't have a mohawk. Not at all. And then I started to go bald. I remember I saw on St. Mark's Place there was like an old punk who would still hang out there, and he had like a balding mohawk, and it was just sad, because he had like the bald spot in the back and all that, but it's just what little bit of spikes he had left. He was just hanging on to them for dear life. Let's see here. In a review of the Clash film Rude Boy, a critic argued that this film was another sign of how the Clash had sold out, a messy, vain work of punk posers. The Clash, when I think about punk, I don't know. That was just never my I was never into like that stuff. I was never into the Clash. I just thought of them as like a pop band. They were never anything really significant to me. X-ray specs. Now, see, poser irony, like I'm a poser. Um, that's another thing that is kind of annoying. Let's see here. New romantic skinny ties. Okay, so Kurt Cobain. Yeah, I would say looking back now, Kurt Cobain was probably a poser, like someone who took his life because he was a drug addict. Simple as that. I don't think there's anything really more to it. And kind of like what I had heard, because um, Buzzo from the Melvins and stuff, and I think he kind of spoke pretty negatively about Kurt Cobain in the past in interviews, and said that like it was no coincidence that Nirvana got as big as they did, that it was pretty much just like how can we start a band and make it big. This is why I've never been one to support local bands. I have never ever been a person to support local bands. I make it a point to not support local bands because chances are if it's a local band, then you might know the people in the band, and then who they are in real life. Like okay, the guitarist, he's just holding on to here until something better comes along. Uh, the drummer is a loser who lives on his mother's couch. The bassist is beats his girlfriend and cheats on her. Like you end up with local bands, a lot of times you will end up knowing the people in their personal lives, and a lot of times you don't want to know that type of stuff. So I don't support local bands. I never have. I'm not one of those people who's like support local music. Like, no, I don't want to support local music, because then when you support local music, then you end up hearing the same shit over and over too. Like, how many times do you have to see that damn band play those same songs over and over? Okay. Sellout. Yeah. Refused. Used the term to refer to early 2000s pop punk fans as kids. More specifically, the new wave of punk posers who came to the music via bands like Good Charlotte. Yeah, see, now is when we're getting really into the poser stuff. Oh God, this is what we're getting into now. Is the mop hair, and the studded belt and the girl jeans and stuff like this. Like but it is nice to see people pulling rank and calling people posers when it's necessary. Um, One writer argued that the Los Angeles punk scene was changed by the invasion of antagonistic suburban posers. which bred rising violence and led to the general breakdown of the hardcore scene. Yeah, hardcore scene did get to be a little rough during that time. Like tough guy like a tough guy hardcore was a thing, and the mosh pits were like a lot of times it was like they were in the pit just to like get in a workout. I mean, I think moshing at that time is what the UFC is now, pretty much. It's that whole genre was, and they always wore like basketball jerseys and stuff. That whole scene was never anything that I was into. Okay, let's see here. What else do we have? Heavy metal subculture. Here we are. Posers in heavy metal subculture. Jeffrey Arnett, who's that? A professor in the Department of Psychology at Clark University in Massachusetts. His main research interest is in emerging adulthood, a term he coined which refers to the distinct phase between adolescence and young adulthood occurring from the ages of 18 to 25. That's weird. I still kind of think of myself as just emerging into adulthood because I've never been married and my life savings is tied up in a vinyl collection and stereo equipment. Um, I've never owned a suit. Um, and I don't plan on ever owning a suit. I don't even at this point in my life, when I die, I probably won't even be buried in a suit. They're going to be like, what the hell? Um, so yeah, I still think of myself as being in this emerging adulthood phase of life. Definitely goes far past 18 to 25. Yeah, goes really far past that. Jeffrey Arnett argues that the heavy metal subculture classifies members into two categories: acceptance as an authentic metalhead, or rejection as a fake, a poser, or a decadent. In a 1993 profile of heavy metal fans' subculture of alienation, the author notes that the scene classified some members as posers, that is, heavy metal performers or fans who pretended to be part of the subculture, but who were deemed to lack authenticity and sincerity. In 1986, Spin magazine referred to poser metal. Exactly. This is one thing too that I've talked about before, is that there are plenty of bands out there that are just posers in the bands. It's poser. It's just posturing for appearance. Um, but yeah, poser metal is a very real thing. Very real thing. Let's see. In 2014, Stuart Taylor wrote that in the Bay Area thrash metal scene of the 1980s, in venues where bands like Exodus played, metal fans who liked hair metal bands such as Rat, Motley Crue, and Stryper were considered to be posers. You know, that's we all like, Rat, Motley Crue. I love the first Motley Crue album. I really do. Stryper, can't say that I've ever listened to anything by Stryper. Rat, of course. I mean, I haven't listened to any of that stuff in years. Although I would listen to the first Motley Crue album again. I even have that on vinyl. I'm gonna say, I mean, that was for the time though. Over the years, there has been acceptance of bands like Motley Crue and stuff. You can listen to Motley Crue and you're not a poser. You're fine. You can be I guess they're grandfathered into acceptance. But yeah, let's see here. What was Rick? Didn't know Kurt's middle name was Donald. The Donald, right? Um, Green Day, Blink 182, Good Charlotte, Newfoundland. Oh God, all his pop punk, pseudo punk bands are massive offenders. They are. I'm telling you that. And then all of that too is like that pop punk, um, mop hair, studded belt, girl jeans, all of that was just like that's where just like, something of like where the posers just it wasn't, like before that a poser was isolated to, oh yeah, this one person is a poser who they're a hippie on Monday and on Tuesday they're a punk or whatever. But that's where but that whole right there, that's when that whole scene of just so many posers. Good Lord. Those youth crew shows were wild back in the day. Yeah, that type of stuff. I was in be buried like GG, no cleanup or tax a bottle, no suit required. Yep, yep. I again, GG Allen, not my thing. Was never into that. Oh, interesting. Marduk is mentioned here. The Swedish black metal band Marduk, which aimed to be, quote, most brutal and blasphemous band ever, uses Nazi imagery such as the Nazi Panzer tank in their songs and album art. Example given, their 1999 album is titled Panzer Division Marduk. The use of Nazi imagery offended neo-Nazi black metal bands who called Marduk posers. Yeah, all right. Yeah, see, I've never thought of Marduk. I mean, the thing too with stuff like that where there's context, and a lot of the context, if they're the content of their lyrics and the overarching theme of the album or their identity is based on a certain context, then I never thought of Marduk as a Nazi band just because they had Panzer tanks on their album art, because I always kind of just look at it as what's the context. um but no, I don't know, to offend the neo-Nazi black metal bands, I they're now the neo-Nazi metal bands, they're offended. They're like, mm-mm. Marduk, they're not one of us. No, no, we've washed our hands of them. They're posers. They've offended the neo-Nazi black metal bands. Um, in the heavy metal subculture, some critics use the term to describe bands that are seen as excessively commercial, such as MTV-friendly glam metal groups, in which hair, makeup, and fancy outfits are more important than the music. During the 1980s, thrash metal fans called pop metal bands metal posers or false metal. Another metal subgenre, new metal, is seen as controversial amongst fans of other metal genres. And the genre's detractors have labeled new metal derogatory terms such as mallcore, winecore, grunge for the zeros, and sports rock. Wow. Yeah, that is like woo. And yeah, I mean, I think all of us whose ages all fall within the you know late 30s, 40s, we probably have at least one or two new metal CDs in our collections. I'm sure someone out there has the first Deftones album, um, something like that. But Mallcore, yeah, it really is though. This is going back to my idea that really posers just really boomed in the late 90s and the 2000s is when it was just suddenly posers were everywhere. It's MTV, and then it was Hot Topic, and Hot Topic was a way for the posers to get their studded belts and their My Chemical Romance t-shirts and all of that, and their what was that hair dye that they all needed to have. I forget what it was called, but yeah. Oh, God. Gregory Heaney of AllMusic has described the genre as one of metal's more unfortunate pushes into the mainstream. Jonathan Davis, the frontman of the pioneering new metal band Korn, said in an interview, "There's a lot of closed-minded metal purists that would hate something because it's not true to metal or whatever, but Korn has never been a metal band, dude. Dude, we're not a metal band. We've always been looked at as what they called the new metal thing. But we've always been the black sheep and we never fit into that kind of thing. So we're always ever evolving and we always piss fans off and we're gaining other fans and it is how it is." Insightful dialogue right there. Um okay, see now this is where things get controversial. Ron Quintana wrote, when Metallica was trying to find a place in the LA metal scene in the early 1980s, it was difficult for the band to play their heavy music and win over a crowd in a land where posers ruled and anything fast and heavy was ignored. I couldn't imagine being something like that where, yeah, say what you will about Metallica, but they've made a whole shitload of money uh, in their career. They don't ever need to worry about losing their job or filing for unemployment or, you'll never see Lars, driving it for Uber or James Hetfield, being a door dasher or anything like that. It's don't ever need to worry about that. They're set well for life. Let's see here. Damian Montgomery, frontman of Ritual Carnage. Ritual Carnage is a thrash metal band formed in 1989. All the members are Japanese except for Damian Montgomery, their American frontman and leader. That name, Ritual Carnage, I don't know. Those are two words that you can find all over the place, Ritual and Carnage. And of course, there was, that one band, the earache band Carnage, as authentic, no frills, poser bashing, nun devouring kind of gentleman, an enthusiastic metalhead, truly in love with the lifestyle he preaches and unquestionably practices. Now, I gotta question this though. Nun devouring. How can you now? What does that mean? He just likes to dine out at the Y. Like nun, like what kind of nun devouring are we talking about here? I mean, I've always, I've never really interacted with a nun before, but they always seem like they're probably just nice old cat ladies. I don't have any reason to want to go out and bash any nuns. They have a reputation for being pretty polite. Although I think for people who, went to maybe a Catholic school, there were always stories about their hands, a ruler and getting their hands slapped with a ruler. But, that's not anything that, I've never had any religion in my life. So I'm kind of like indifferent, where like the whole idea of Catholicism and Christianity means as little to me just as Satanism and atheism does, because like those also don't mean anything to me either. Like I've had my parents like zero religion ever, so I'm kind of just like whatever. But nun devouring, I will question this though, David, or no, Damian Montgomery, Mr. Montgomery. I'd like to have a discussion with you about this nun devouring activity. Let's see here. What else here? In 2002, Josh Wood argued that the credibility of heavy metal in North America is being destroyed by the genre's demotion to horror movie soundtracks, wrestling events, and worst of all, so-called mallcore groups like Slipknot and Korn, which makes the true metal devotee's path to metalldom perilous and fraught with posers. I like that. That's a pretty bold statement there. Fraught with posers. What's here? Well, I have in some Soulfly. Yeah, you know what? Soulfly, I never ever got into anything Max did outside of Sepultura, except for Nail Bomb. Um, just wasn't my thing. I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna say any of that was like mallcore in any way because Max Cavalera had metal cred, so it's I can't really think of anyone who sold any band that had cred, but who sold out to the point where they were mallcore. I mean, mallcore was like, you know, My Chemical Romance. God, I remember I dated this girl once, long years and years ago, who was into shit like that. Oh, it was so awful. And of course, me, I was just lucky to be getting some, so I would pretend like, oh yeah, that's good music. Yeah, sure. Um, but like those type of bands where the singer was wearing black eyeliner and yeah, that was mallcore. In an article on Axl Rose entitled Ex-White Boy Poser, Rose admitted that he had time to reflect on heavy metal posturing of the last few decades. We thought we were so badass. Then NWA came out rapping about this world where you walk out of your house and you get shot. It was just so clear what stupid little white boy posers we were. Some sage Axl Rose right there, reflecting upon life. Um, can't say that Axl. Guns N' Roses were kind of different because they weren't hair metal like Poser, what would have been called Poser stuff. Like they were glammy, but they were still good, and it was stuff that guys were into. Like it wasn't chick metal, like the chick metal, like Poison and shit like that. That was for chicks. There weren't dudes who listened to Poison. So that was like Poison was like a poser band. Guns N' Roses, GNR, especially, GNR. That was some good stuff. Nowadays I can't. Nowadays I can't listen to anything Guns N' Roses. I can't. Like I haven't listened to Appetite or Use Your Illusions 1 or 2 in years. It's the type of thing where I've heard it too many times, but also I've heard Axl's voice. Like if I just hear Axl's voice, I just don't even want to hear it anymore. That's the same thing with the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger's voice. I just don't want to hear Mick Jagger's voice anymore. Heard it too many times. But yeah. What do we have here? In the Ailstorm song Heavy Metal Pirates, numerous metaphors and allusions to pirates are made, including references to cutlasses, and it includes the line, "No quarter for the posers. We bring them death and pain." I like that. I like that. It's like it's like marching orders. We bring the posers death and pain. The Manowar song Metal Warriors includes the lines, "Heavy metal or no metal at all, wimps and posers leave the hall," and "All wimps and posers go on, get out." Yeah, exactly. Now there is the guy from Man of War who was arrested for CP. So I would say that's probably a worse offense than being a poser. If I had to choose the two, I definitely would be like, yeah, I'm a poser. I'm all poser. I think that his offense is probably worse than being a poser, and the courts also feel the same way. So yeah. Anyways, goth. Now, see, the goth scene is something where some of the girls, when goth girls were hot, they were really hot. You know, especially they were a lot of times they were into the whole like bondage stuff and um yeah, goth girls, they could go one of two ways. When they were hot, they were really hot, but if they weren't hot, then they were not hot at all. You know, the goth guys were always just weird and flaky and you feminine, but just yeah, I don't know. God, sometimes I'm glad that I was just a fat nerd because being a fat nerd, I could still listen to the music, but I could just never really get caught up in the whole fashion and the identity just because I was I was you know would lose cred for just being a fat nerd, you know. Um, okay, here we are. The Goth Bible, posers for the goth scene as goth wannabes, usually young kids going through a goth phase who do not hold to goth sensibilities. I don't know what a goth sensibility is besides, just, wearing, like combat boots when it's 95 degrees outside or, you know, goth sensibilities like like, that is one thing about the goth scene is there were never really any politics in it like they were pretty far removed from any sort of like socio-political stance on anything. It just seemed like their whole thing was just about being depressed and gloomy and dark, but there was never like any real goths for for this or anything like that. They were and I respect that. I get annoyed by stuff that's too political. Um but anyways, don't want to hold on to goth sensibilities, but want to be part of the goth crowd. Kilpatrick dismisses poser goths as bat babies whose clothing is bought at mall store. Hot Topic with their parents' money. Yeah, yeah, that's. But still, a lot of times the girls were pretty hot, so they get a pass. The hot girls, the hot goth girls, they get a pass from me. So I'm not going to say anything bad about them. Hip hop subculture. I rap singers and stuff. I've never ever been into rap music or hip hop, so I have no place, saying anything or anything like that because I just have never been. Although I believe that there are plenty of like fake rappers out there who rap about this like violent lifestyle that they supposedly live, but it's just all just stage persona and bravado. I completely believe that there is a lot of that, but yeah, I'm not going to spend any time really thinking about. I think the white guys, yeah, like the white guys are always just like the big posers. Like I have a difficult time taking any white rapper serious. It's kind of like hippies. Hippies are another one too, where um the hippies who, I knew when I was younger, they were just always just losers. They smelled, uh, they were fake. They were always high. And, it's kind of like the white guy with dreadlocks. Like, come on, just give it up. You're white. You're not cool. You know? But yeah, hippies are another thing. Hippies who, like where I grew up, hippies were also preps too. So like the preppies and the hippies were they were like the same thing. Um, okay, yeah. So other genres and subcultures. Mick Jagger called singer Patti Smith a poser of the worst kind. Intellectual bullshit. Trying to be a street girl. Wow. Damn. Mick talking some shit right there about Patti Smith. Come on. Patti Smith was yeah, I mean I think I have what was it, the Pretenders, that yeah, there are those two Pretenders albums that are pretty decent, but yeah, again, I don't know anything about, who she was as a person. Now skateboarding, okay, so skating is a big this is where posers posers would very quickly get called out in this by skaters, like kind of like the kids who bought the skateboard but never actually skated. They would just walk around with it. um in the 1988 video game Skater Die, Poser Pete is the name of the challenger for beginner level players. Poser Pete, I like that. Skater Die, what system was that on? Skater Die is a skateboarding game released by Electronic Arts in 1987 for the Commodore 64. It is Electronic Arts' first internally developed game. Ports for Apple IIgs, MS-DOS, Amstrad CPC, and ZX Spectrum. Okay, now ZX Spectrum, that was a Zilog chipset, were released the following years. It was ported to the Nintendo. So that's going way back there. Way back. Poser Pete. All right. So this is kind of NES and PC. Yeah. Yeah, well, Commodore 64. Jesus Christ. I remember playing some of that. I remember playing DOS games. I had an Apple II. It wasn't an Apple II GS, but it was an Apple II CI, I think is the model that I owned. I have no idea what an Amstrad CPC was. I'll need to. I should look that up later. But the ZX Spectrum, man, I'm thinking of something else. Anyways, so oh hey, look at this, Wilson, Ottawa police right here. Okay, so in Canada, there are alleged military posers. Wilson, you got to fill me in on this. Individuals who wear army uniforms and medals, who are not actually current or previous members of the armed forces. In November 2014, Ottawa police charged one of these alleged posers for impersonating a soldier after he appeared in TV interviews during Remembrance Day ceremonies wearing a uniform and medals, which he had no right to wear. Wow. He's like, oh yeah, I saw one live in an interview. Wow. Military posers. Interesting. So you know what's weird is sometimes here I'll hear about on the news someone impersonating a cop and things like that, and I don't know. The concept of a jazz poser dates back to the 1940s. Bob White from Downbeat argued that some jazz critics knew nothing about jazz and nothing about chords, tone, or the technical aspects of jazz. Instead, they would just learn the names of a few old masters and become a romantic, a charlatan, a poser, a pseudo-intellectual, an aesthetic snob, well on the way to success. As a jazz critic in the 2000s, the CBC produced a radio show about how to spot jazz posers in a jazz scene. These were described as people who do not know much about the music, but they can name drop the names of famous performers. Oof. That's rough. That's rough. But I like that critique though, to become a romantic, a charlatan, a poser, a pseudo intellectual, an aesthetic snob, a charlatan. Wow. I that's going right up there with the decadent, the poser, the decadent, the charlatan. I think we need to start bringing back all of those terms. Anyways, oh, there's a lot in here. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to have a part two about posers, and we'll dig even deeper about the different. We'll do a deep dive to some of the other type of posers out there. Maybe we'll dig deeper into jazz posers, and then kind of get more back into kind of the punk posers and the goth posers and poser Pete. Yeah. Anyways, has it been an hour and a half? It sure has. Holy shit. All right. Well, this was a productive stream. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Wilson, Rick, thanks for hanging out. Brian, and we'll chat again soon.